You're standing in a cramped office aboard the battleship Nagato, anchored in Hiroshima Bay. It's 3:47 a.m. on December 8, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor ended 6 hours ago, while the rest of the Imperial Japanese Navy is celebrating the greatest tactical victory in naval history. Commander Minoru Genda is sitting alone, staring at casualty reports and reconnaissance photographs. His hands are shaking, not from fear, from rage, because the numbers he's looking at tell him something nobody else wants to admit. Japan just lost the war. The reports spread across his desk should be cause for celebration. 8 American battleships sunk or damaged, 188 aircraft destroyed, 2,403 Americans dead. Admiral Nagumo's carrier strike force achieved near-perfect tactical execution. Japanese losses were minimal. 29 aircraft, 5 midget submarines, 64 men. By every conventional military metric, Pearl Harbor was a stunning success. But Genda wasn't looking at conventional metrics. He was looking at 3 photographs that made him physically ill. The first photograph showed Pearl Harbor's massive fuel storage tanks, intact, untouched. Over 4.5 million gallons of oil sitting in massive above-ground tanks that could have been destroyed with a single bomb run. The second photograph showed the submarine base, undamaged. The repair facilities, the dry docks, the machine shops, all functional. And the third photograph, the one that made Genda want to scream, showed empty moorings where America's 3 aircraft carriers should have been. Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, all at sea, all untouched, all now the most dangerous weapons in the Pacific. Genda had been one of the primary planners of the Pearl Harbor attack. He'd spent months designing the approach routes, the bomb loads, the timing. He'd argued for a third-wave strike to destroy exactly those fuel tanks and repair facilities. Admiral Nagumo had refused. Too risky. Preserve the force. Get out while we're ahead. And now Genda was staring at the consequences of that caution. Japan had executed the attack brilliantly and failed strategically in ways that would prove catastrophic. But the real nightmare was sitting in a folder marked American Industrial Capacity. Japanese naval intelligence had compiled this report over the past 2 years. Genda had read it before. Now he was reading it again, doing calculations that made his stomach turn. The numbers were obscene. America's steel production was approximately 10 times Japan's. Their oil production was literally hundreds of times greater. Their shipbuilding capacity was so vast that Japan couldn't even accurately estimate it. The report suggested America could build warships faster than Japan could sink them, much faster. Genda pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began writing calculations. If America maintained current production rates, they would replace the Pearl Harbor losses in approximately 8 months. But America wouldn't maintain current production rates, they would increase them. Roosevelt had already been expanding military production before Pearl Harbor. Now, with the American public enraged and unified, those production rates would explode. Genda estimated that by late 1943, America would have numerical naval superiority in the Pacific. By 1944, that superiority would be overwhelming. By 1945, Japan would be facing an American fleet so large it would darken the ocean. The door opened. Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida entered, still wearing his flight suit. Fuchida had led the air attack on Pearl Harbor, had personally given the Tora 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 signal confirming surprise was achieved. He was grinning, riding the adrenaline of combat and victory. Then he saw Genda's face. The grin faded. Fuchida had known Genda for years. He recognized that expression. Something was very wrong. We missed the carriers, Genda said quietly. All 3 of them. Enterprise was supposed to be in port. Intelligence said she'd return by December 6th. She didn't. She's still at sea with her entire air group intact. Fuchida nodded slowly. He'd known this already, had reported it to Nagumo, but in the excitement of the attack's success, the missing carriers had seemed like a minor detail. Now, seeing Genda's expression, Fuchida realized it wasn't a minor detail. It was the entire point. Battleships don't matter, Genda continued, his voice tight with controlled fury. We just spent months planning an attack to sink battleships, and battleships are obsolete. We proved that today. We proved it with carrier aircraft, and the Americans still have their carriers, all of them, while we just taught them exactly how to use carrier aviation to devastating effect. The irony was savage. Japan had demonstrated beyond any doubt that carriers were now the decisive naval weapon, and then failed to sink a single American carrier. But Fuchida was still riding the victory high. We destroyed 8 battleships. The American Pacific Fleet is crippled. We have 6 months, maybe a year before they can rebuild. That's what Yamamoto predicted. That's the window we needed. Genda shook his head. 6 months until what? Until we've conquered what? The Philippines, Malaya, The Dutch East Indies, and then what? We'll have a defensive perimeter thousands of miles long that we cannot possibly defend against an enemy with unlimited resources and production capacity. He pushed the industrial capacity report across the desk. Fokida started reading. His expression changed as the numbers registered. These can't be accurate, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They're conservative estimates, Genda replied. The real numbers are probably worse. America produced 19,000 military aircraft last year. We produced 5,000. And that gap is going to widen exponentially because we just gave America something we cannot give them, a reason to mobilize their entire economy for total war. Genda stood up and walked to the porthole, staring out at the dark water. Do you know what we really accomplished today? We unified American public opinion in a way nothing else could. Before Pearl Harbor, America was divided, isolationists versus interventionists. Roosevelt wanted to enter the war but couldn't get congressional support. We just solved that problem for him. We gave him the attack that will have every American factory running 3 shifts, every man between 18 and 40 volunteering, every woman entering the workforce. We turned American industrial might into a weapon pointed directly at us. Fuchida was reading the report more carefully now. He found the section on shipbuilding capacity. His face went pale. This says America has shipyards that can produce an Essex-class carrier every 3 months once production is fully ramped up. That's correct, Genda said. By mid-1943, America will be launching a fleet carrier every 12 weeks. We cannot build carriers that fast. We cannot replace losses that fast. We cannot even produce enough pilots to crew the carriers we have. The pilot training numbers were especially devastating. Japan had begun the war with approximately 3,500 highly trained carrier pilots. These men had trained for years, had accumulated 800 or more flight hours. They were the best carrier pilots in the world, but they were irreplaceable. Japan's training program could produce maybe 100 new carrier pilots per month, and these new pilots had perhaps 200 hours of flight time. America's training program was about to explode in scale. Within a year, they'd be training thousands of pilots monthly. We're going to run out of experienced pilots before we run out of carriers, Genda said. Every veteran we lose is gone forever. America can replace their losses. We cannot. It's mathematics. Cold, brutal mathematics. Fuchida set down the report. He was beginning to understand why Genda was so disturbed. So what do we do? Genda laughed bitterly. Do? We've already done it. We attacked Pearl Harbor. We started a war with an enemy that has 10 times our industrial capacity, hundreds of times our oil production, and twice our population. We started a war we cannot possibly win. Yamamoto said. Fuchida began. Yamamoto said he could run wild for 6 months. Genda interrupted. He also said that if the war lasted more than a year, he had no confidence in victory. He opposed this war from the beginning. He told the government that fighting America was madness. They ignored him. And now we're all committed to fighting a war our own combined fleet commander said was unwinnable. Genda returned to his desk and pulled out another document. This one was marked with the highest security classification. It was a pre-war strategic assessment written by Yamamoto himself. Genda had seen it months ago, but now he read sections aloud. Japan's only chance in a war with America is to inflict such severe defeats in the first 6 months that American public opinion forces a negotiated settlement. If America chooses to fight a protracted war of attrition, Japan will inevitably lose. And what did we do today? Genda asked. Did we inflict a defeat that will make America want peace? Or did we inflict an attack so outrageous, so apparently treacherous, that America will fight until we're completely destroyed? Fuchida had no answer. The attack had been scheduled to begin 30 minutes after Japan delivered a formal declaration of war, but due to decoding delays at the Japanese embassy in Washington, the declaration wasn't delivered until after the attack started. To America, Pearl Harbor looked like a sneak attack, a violation of international law, treachery. Roosevelt is calling it a day of infamy, Genda said. American propaganda has already labeled us as treacherous attackers who strike without warning. We handed them the perfect narrative. We're not just the enemy, we're the villains, and you don't negotiate with villains, you destroy them. The strategic implications were catastrophic. Japan had needed America to view this as just another war, another diplomatic dispute that could be settled through negotiation after some initial defeats. Instead, America now viewed this as a moral crusade, a righteous war against evil. Those kinds of wars end in unconditional surrender, not negotiated peace. Genda pulled out yet another document. This one detailed American submarine capability. Before Pearl Harbor, American submarines were restricted by peacetime rules of engagement. They couldn't sink merchant ships without warning. They had to allow crews to abandon ship. Now they're going to wage unrestricted submarine warfare against our merchant fleet, and we are completely dependent on merchant shipping for everything. Oil from the Indies, rubber from Malaya. rice from Indochina, iron ore from China. All of it has to be shipped through waters that American submarines will infest. The numbers were damning. Japan had approximately 6 million tons of merchant shipping. Intelligence estimates suggested America could produce submarines at a rate that would sink 300,000 tons of Japanese shipping per year. Japan's shipyards could build maybe 200,000 tons of merchant shipping annually. The mathematics were inexorable. By 1944, Japan would face economic collapse simply from submarine warfare, regardless of fleet actions or land battles. Fuchida was silent for a long moment. Then, "Why are you telling me this? What do you want me to do?" Genda met his eyes. "I want you to understand what we've actually accomplished today. We haven't won a great victory. We've started a countdown to defeat. Every calculation, every strategic analysis, every economic assessment points to the same conclusion. Japan cannot win a protracted war with America. We needed a short war ending in negotiated peace. Pearl Harbor guaranteed we won't get that. We'll get a long war ending in absolute defeat. Should we have not attacked at all?" Fuchida asked. It was a dangerous question. Questioning the wisdom of national strategy was close to treason. But in this small office, in the middle of the night, the two officers could speak honestly. "We shouldn't have started this war," Genda said flatly. "The army wanted access to resources in Southeast Asia. They claimed we could take British and Dutch colonies without America interfering. Maybe they were right. Maybe Roosevelt couldn't have gotten Congress to declare war over Malaya and the Indies. We'll never know, because we attacked Pearl Harbor and gave him exactly what he needed." Genda gestured at the casualty reports. "We killed 2,403 Americans today. That sounds like a lot, but America has 130 million people. We killed less than 0.002% of their population, and in return we enraged all of them. We created unity where there was division. We created determination where there was reluctance. We turned American industrial might into an instrument of our destruction." He paused. "And we did it for 8 battleships, 8 obsolete battleships that won't matter in the carrier war we just initiated." The tragedy was that Genda had argued for a different approach. In planning meetings months ago, he'd advocated for a third-wave strike targeting the fuel storage, repair facilities and submarine base. Some officers had supported him, but Nagumo had refused. The admiral was concerned about American counterattack, wanted to preserve his force, believed that sinking battleships was sufficient, and Nagumo was in command. "Could a third wave have changed anything?" Fuchida asked. Genda considered. "It would have bought time. Destroying those fuel tanks would have crippled Pearl Harbor as a base for months. Destroying the repair facilities would have forced damaged ships to return to West Coast shipyards, adding months to their repair time. Destroying the submarine base would have delayed American submarine warfare. We might have gotten an extra 6 months before American counterattacks became serious. But ultimately," Fuchida pressed. "Ultimately, no," Genda admitted. "The fundamental problem isn't tactical execution, it's strategic reality. We started a war with an enemy that has overwhelming advantages in every category that matters for modern industrial warfare: population, production, resources, geography. Even if we'd executed Pearl Harbor perfectly, even if we'd sunk all 3 carriers and destroyed every facility, America would still eventually overwhelm us through sheer industrial might." Fuchida stood up. He walked to the porthole and stared out at the same dark water Genda had been watching. "So we've already lost. The war started 6 hours ago, and we've already lost. We lost the war when we decided to fight it," Genda replied. "Pearl Harbor just made the defeat inevitable. Before today there was perhaps a slim chance that America might not fully commit, that they might fight a limited war. That possibility is gone now. We're going to face the full might of American power, and we cannot survive that." The two officers sat in silence, contemplating the implications. Outside, aboard other ships in the fleet, celebrations continued. Sailors were drinking, officers were being congratulated, the radio was playing martial music. Japan had just achieved its greatest military victory, and 2 of the men most responsible for that victory knew it was actually the beginning of the end. Genda gathered up his documents and calculations. He placed them in a folder, marked it with his personal seal, and locked it in his desk. This analysis could never be shared officially. Speaking defeatism was punishable by death. Questioning national strategy was treason. The calculations showing Japan's inevitable defeat would have to remain private knowledge, held by officers who understood the mathematics but couldn't speak them aloud. "What happens now?" Fuchida asked. "Now?" Genda smiled without humor. "Now we fight the war we cannot win. We execute the operations we've planned. We conquer the territories we've targeted. We build the defensive perimeter we cannot defend. And we watch as America slowly, methodically, inevitably destroys us, ship by ship, island by island, city by city, until there's nothing left." "How long?" Fuchida asked quietly. Genda had already done those calculations. Ayamapo's prediction of 6 months of success is probably accurate. We'll take the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Indies. We'll push as far as we can while America is still reeling. Then, sometime in mid-1942, maybe around June, America will counterattack. They'll have figured out carrier warfare, they'll have replaced their losses, they'll have mobilized their production, and they'll start pushing us back. By 1943, we'll be on the defensive. By 1944, we'll be losing territories we conquered. By 1945, he trailed off. They both knew how it would end. Fakida turned from the porthole, and we can't stop it. Genda confirmed, we're locked into this path now. The government won't seek peace. The military won't accept defeat. We'll fight until we're completely destroyed, because the alternative is admitting we made a catastrophic mistake, and empires don't admit mistakes. They die defending them. As Fakida left the office, Genda returned to his calculations one final time. He wrote a final note in his private diary, a diary that would survive the war and be discovered decades later. December 8, 1941. We attacked Pearl Harbor today. In doing so, we have guaranteed our own destruction. History will call this a brilliant victory, but those of us who understand the mathematics know the truth. This was the day Japan lost the war. Commander Minoru Genda survived the war. He was present at Midway 6 months later, watching his predictions materialize as Japanese carriers burned. He witnessed the island-hopping campaign that methodically destroyed Japan's defensive perimeter. He saw American production overwhelm Japanese forces exactly as his calculations predicted, and on August 15, 1945, when Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, Genda remembered that night aboard the Nagato, the night he'd calculated that Pearl Harbor would lose the war, the night he'd been proven right in the worst possible way. December 8, 1941 was the day one Japanese officer did the mathematics and understood that his country's greatest victory was actually its ultimate defeat.